Bill.
Hello, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ. Crazy stuff happening. Fiscal cliffs. Rubio, Ryan speaking. All sorts of stuff. It was supposed to get slow. It was supposed to calm down after the election, Bill. It just hasn't happened.
Well, I always felt that knowing that this fiscal cliff was there, and knowing, and this is the part I feel people don't grasp, that it was deliberately designed by both President Obama and Speaker Boehner to come to a head after Election Day. This was not. It gets reported sort of like this sort of a crazy bureaucratic screw up. Those numbnuts in Washington don't know how to govern. And I even saw, I know you mentioned the Rubio breakfast this morning. Bob Woodward and I spoke to the same thing, and he's quoted saying, "This is not how Washington should be governed." He's being all huffy and protective of the institutions, as if everything else that's gone on the last 30 years is somehow emblematic of perfect governance.
Yeah, it's this whole notion that things are worse now than ever. Not really true. I mean, yeah, the debt's higher, than ever. But in terms of like civility, I mean, they used to cane people on the floor. I mean, so we fought a civil war. I mean, things are not, necessarily
just the annals of budget politics. Like, there's been plenty of budget gimmickry over the course of modern American history, and and what's happening here, which I think is very interesting, is both sides came to an agreement last year, at the peak of bipartisan acrimony, and implicitly made an agreement which both sides had to know if Obama won re-election, it would put maximum pressure on Republicans to raise taxes. I see no explanation that shows that Boehner did not know what he was getting into in signing the agreement. Maybe he thought Obama would win, or at least hoped he wouldn't, but he had to know if Obama did win, this would be the outcome. And the flip side of that is that it also puts pressure on Democrats to do something about Medicare, at least, and maybe Social Security. And I think Obama went into that with that understanding as well, that he wanted, and maybe that he wants that he wants to have a situation where he can go back to his team and say, this is what I had to do. And we're seeing both sides deal with these rifts and fractures. I think they've been more pronounced on the right and the left so far, but that may change once you get closer to an eventual deal. But this strikes me as going as planned. I mean, so Woodward's looking at this as some sort of Washington disarray. I feel like Obama and Boehner are doing exactly what they intended to do with this.
Well, I think your point's well taken that we knew this was coming. I think that it's sort of one of those things where you always hope that after an election and around Christmas time, things will slow down, and they never seem to anymore. I think there was a time when that happened, but in recent years, there's been a lot of business happening around the holidays. I think that some of it's like a psychological thing. Like, if you told me when I was 18, if you told me if you sign up to join the Marines, in 6 weeks you'll be shipped off to Paris Island, but we're going to give you $5,000. I would have gladly probably taken the money, because 6 weeks may never come. I could be dead in 6 weeks. I mean, there's just that notion that, like, kick the can down the road. This always happens to me when people invite me to do ththings. It sounds like a great idea. Will you go to Bulgaria and speak to our conservative group? It's next November, and you're like, well, that's so far out. And by next November, I'm going to be a multimillionaire, so time won't be a problem, and money won't be a problem. And so you say yes, thinking that it'll never come, and then or that the world will be totally different when it happens. And so I think it did catch up to them. Bill, though, I think my take on this, I think two things. One, and I don't like to engage in hyperbole, at least not as much as some commentators do. But I really think Obama wants to go off the cliff. I think that he believes he's running up the score right now. He has a team that is very feeble that he's playing against, the Republicans. And I wrote a piece at the Daily Caller today saying that the future may very well be bright just like a football analogy. Last year the Indianapolis Colts stunk. Now they're pretty darn good. The Redskins weren't all that good, last year. Now they have RG3, so things change. But right now the Republican Party is in disarray, and I think that Obama is risking America's, fiscal condition to twist the knife in Republicans and try to beat them into submission. They are incredibly vulnerable. I don't see how they can win if they raise tax rates. And Democrats are insisting on tax rates, not on deductions, not on loopholes, but on tax rates. If Republicans do that, if they cave and do that, it'll be a disaster for the Republican Party. It will undermine one of the foundational principles that they believe in, and it will really destroy them with the base. If they don't, and we go off the fiscal cliff, they will be demonized and blamed. So they're in I think, a lose-lose proposition. I'm more pessimistic than a lot of conservatives, but that's how I see it. And I think that Obama is more than willing to trade the possible ramifications, economic ramifications, to vanquish his Republican counterparts.
Well, I can't get totally inside his head. I agree at minimum that he's willing to go over the cliff and willing to try to extract additional leverage in that instance. But I don't think he is necessarily going to refuse all possible deals and go over the cliff no matter what.
Oh, no, I agree. Here's how he can vanquish them two ways. One way is to get them to agree to raise tax rates. That will vanquish. That will harm them severely. Or if they won't do that, it's basically like saying, you want the chair or do you want the noose? These are your options. So he's not going to let them off the hook, even if they could prove that they could generate $1 trillion in revenue via, deductions, capping deductions, whatever. He wouldn't go for it. They will insist on tax rates because it's not about revenue for them. It's about, fairness, and I think it's about politics more than anything.
Well, I think it's both. The argument has been that if you do it solely through deductions, you can't do it in a fair way. You're going to have to dig deep into the middle class on things like mortgage interest deduction and travel interest deduction, which they feel negates the purpose of the overall reform. But I do think it's what's particularly interesting to me is raising tax rates has been the one thing, I think the only thing, that the president has made non-negotiable. Everything else is a position that he holds, things he's proposed, things he would prefer to do, things they say it might be hard to do without this. But tax rates is the only thing where they say no deal without this. And so once you're out there on the limb like that, you really can't back off of it without sacrificing all of your perceived political capital. And that puts the Republicans in the position of saying, okay, either you accept the cliff, you accept what happens after January 1st, all the Bush tax cuts are gone, sequester comes down on the military and on the healthcare side, which are largely proposals that Obama wants to implement anyway, because they've seen it as cost savers and not benefit cuts. So if you're not willing to accept that, and Boehner doesn't seem to want to accept that, Boehner seems to accept the political notion that they will get blamed for that, so that needs to be averted for their own political vitality. The question becomes, what is the price we want to extract for accepting higher rates? And they don't even necessarily be rates all the way up to the Clinton level. I think Obama has left wiggle room on how high those rates have to go. But the ball is in Boehner's court to say, okay, what is the price going to be? What is in our best interest to extract for that exchange? And I don't think, certainly not publicly, they haven't made clear, is it Medicare cuts? Is it Social Security? Is it a CPI switch? Is it a retirement age? Is it some other kind of spending cut? I don't think they know, or Boehner knows, he's kept it very close to his vest, what makes that deal better than just going over the cliff and never doing it. I mean, Obama might want to go over to do a deal 3 weeks after the fact, But if Boehner doesn't accept the tax rate deal, then you're just going over and that's it.
There are conservatives who believe that Boehner will cave on tax rates if it's a couple of things. One, if Democrats offer to really make some big cuts to entitlements, and if they could negotiate something like a millionaire's tax or raising rates not quite back to where they were with Clinton, but higher than they are today.
Well, there's really wiggle room as far as where you make the threshold. I mean, Obama has not made it that it has to be $250K and up.
Right.
He said they have to go, rates have to go up on the wealthy, so there's definitely wiggle room there where you make the threshold.
So some people hold out hope for that. I don't, Bill, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think that Republicans are going to take a hard-line approach which says we will not raise tax rates. We can generate revenue, but we will not raise tax rates. We can cap deductions, we can cut spending, but not raise taxes. And I think that the strategic reason for doing that is Republicans assume, if you assume that you lose either way, if you lose the PR battle, you get blamed if you go over the cliff, and you get blamed if you raise taxes. Read my lips. I mean, we've seen this played out before. Bill Clinton used that against George H.W. Bush. I mean, James Carville called that the most famous broken promise in American political history. If you watch the
Bush
movie,
Bush was a president breaking that promise, not a speaker breaking that promise. So the ramifications might be different.
Well, Grover Norquist talks about the rat head in the Coke, and he says, Coca-Cola is a great product, and when you buy it, you assume you're going to get the same thing, a pretty tasty soda that's safe. But if you opened a Coca-Cola and you found a rat head in it, it would really undermine the brand. You'd start to think, do I really want a Coke? Maybe you'd start drinking Pepsi or something. And so he says that the Republican brand is they are the party for low taxes. They are the party that does not raise taxes. And once you mess that up, even once, it's like a rat head in the Coke. And you've ruined the brand. So, but my point, Bill, is if Republicans believe that they're damned if they do and damned if they don't, given two bad options, you always stick with your base. You don't screw your base. And I think that's what's going to happen here, Bill. I think we're going over the cliff, and I think that Obama kind of wants that to happen. He wants to force them to either raise taxes, which will damage the party's brand, or go over the cliff, which will damage the party's brand in another way. So I think it's
well. I mean,
politics.
I think if you're right, then yeah, you go over the cliff and the sequester happens and the Bush tax cuts go away and that's that, and everyone muddles through after that point. Maybe the economy takes a short-term hit, but you muddle through.
Well, the other question too is how severe will everybody says that if we go off the cliff, that all the cuts are going to be so severe. That it could lead us into a recession. Now, I know that a lot of the cuts are defense cuts, and frankly, I think that there's probably room to cut in defense. You have to be very careful and surgical in how you do it. It would be interesting if we go off the cliff and the markets don't react in a negative way. We'll have to. Hopefully, we won't find out, but. What do you think about that?
What are the markets be more sensitive to? I mean, on one, it's a short-term austerity hit because it's very abrupt. All these cuts happen very quickly, or could happen very quickly. It's sort of unknown how exactly the sequester gets structured because the White House hasn't quite spelled out all the details of it yet, even though the Republicans have sort of pressed them to. Maybe they find a way to ease it and push as much stuff off as they could under the terms of the law, so the austerity shock wouldn't be as severe. So the markets have to determine how bad does this affect the short-term economy versus their interest in having long-term deficit reduction, because it helps with deficit reduction. It helps a lot of deficit reduction. It's over $1 trillion deficit reduction. So they'll have to weigh those two things and how they react to it.
That may be the only way the Republicans win is if they stand their ground and we go off the cliff and it's not a catastrophic event. It's like Y2K. It's like Y2K.
That might be the calculation. That might be the calculation. But I Boehner certainly.
I don't think that's the calculation, but maybe.
Well, you have to weigh that. You have to weigh how does this affect the brand versus how does it affect our reputation as a responsible governing party. And Boehner certainly seems to have some inclination to say, hey, the Grover Norquist brand sucks. The Grover Norquist brand is killing us. Having this brand was not helpful to us in 2008 and 2012. So maybe we need a different brand, and therefore I'm willing to sacrifice or at least modify the notion. I mean, you can be a low tax party and accept some rate increase at some time. It doesn't mean you're for taxes going through the roof. So Boehner could try to recalibrate the Republican brand on taxes and say, look, we are not the obstructionist Tea Party. We're a responsible governing party that's going to do our best and find common ground while adhering to our basic principles. He could try to spin it that way and tell Grover to suck it. I mean, I don't know if Boehner has it in him. I think he has some inclination in that respect, or else he wouldn't be making any kind of concerted moves at all.
Well, this is something I wrote about at the Week, and I actually talked about it on Morning Joe this morning. Is the plight of the modern day speakership, which I believe has become no political trend has been less noticed, I think, than the diminished power of the speaker. And it used to be, Sam Rayburn, Tip O'Neill. These guys could command their forces essentially, and cajole and threaten, and they had all sorts of carrots and sticks. Bill, that John Boehner doesn't have. I mean, they just did this purge where they kicked, I think, 4 conservatives off of committees. That's about as much as he can do. It used to be that you could give them earmarks or withhold earmarks, or that, essentially the party apparatus was the only party in town. You had to play ball with them. Now you have these outside groups like the Club for Growth that can help candidates raise a lot of money and help them win primaries and beat the handpicked candidates that the party puts up there. So you have this different world. It's like a free agent nation. And I think as a society, we respect leaders less than we used to. We were talking about this offline a little bit, Bill. I think this is part of our culture. That we don't have this. We don't respect institutions and bosses as much as we used to. So anyway, I think all of these forces are kind of culminating to create an environment where John Boehner, through no fault of his own, has the title of speaker, but it doesn't come with all the perks it used to come with.
Well, I totally agree that a modern speaker and a modern president is lacking back-scratching tools that previous presidents and speakers had. You don't have the earmarks to play with. You don't have the patronage offers to play with. So that limits some power there. But I also know, I think Pelosi was a stronger speaker than Boehner. Pelosi kept her people in line. I mean, she did employ a tactic which I think is underappreciated. She had 2 things I think people don't appreciate. One, she went into all these tough votes counting heads and saying, okay, you right-leaning Democrats in vulnerable districts, I don't need you on this one. I'm happy to have a win with a couple vote cushion. So I'm going to count what I need, and I'll say, you guys can have a break on this one. You guys, I need you. And she was able to keep people were able to listen to her in that respect. And some liberals have really praised her, saying, she was tougher than Reid. She cracked the whip, and Reid was this mumble mouth, milquetoast character. But Reid had a different job. Yeah. Reid had to get every single Democrat. He couldn't expend one. He had to get them all. And usually get a couple Republicans, too. So he had a different herding cats job than Pelosi did.
Well, I hear you on the Pelosi argument, and you're not going to get an argument from me that she is tough as nails. I mean, she is a tough lady, like her or not. But having said that, I don't think it's really analogous. I mean, I think the challenges that John Boehner faced, first of all, having this influx of freshman Tea Party candidates, having... not having the presidency. I mean, Pelosi was speaker for 2 years, and then I guess she lost it, right? And
right.
So Boehner, I don't think that they're analogous. Every time I bring this up, someone says, "Well, what about Nancy Pelosi?" And I think that I don't know that the two things are analogous. And I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying that these external forces account for everything. I mean, yes, Boehner probably could be a little bit of a stronger leader, and yes, having these sort of recalcitrant, conservative Tea Party candidates makes it more complicated. But I also think that there are larger systemic forces at play that make it really impossible for a modern speaker to be Sam Rayburn, or in the Senate to be, the master of the Senate, LBJ. I just think the world has changed.
I agree, and the same reason why Obama can't be LBJ as president, or FDR in certain respects. So they don't have the same tools at their disposal. But the question now for Boehner, being that is the case, being that he can't be the speaker who just snaps his fingers and makes everyone fall on the line, but has some interest in being seen as a governing partner and not just a down-the-line obstructionist, what do you do? Do you have to get a majority of Republicans to back whatever the deal is to ensure that there isn't a majority within his party that wants to oust him as speaker? Or does he say, screw it, this is ridiculous. This job is not worth having if I can't make the Republican Party an effective governing party. I'm going to take this to the floor. Even though it has a minority Republican support, it will still command a majority of the House. And if that means into my speakership, fine, I'm going to go out with a legacy achievement. And if the party wants to go, if they want to go off the political cliff, that's their business. I mean, nothing is character suggests he's willing to go Thelma and Louise in that respect. But do you hit a breaking point at some point where you hit your head against the wall enough and you say, look, I have to make a move?
Well, I think those are the two options, Bill, and I think he has chosen the former to be a representative of his caucus, not to attempt to lead them. Because I think that that it would be very short-lived if he attempted to cut a deal and twist arms and whip people and force them to fall in line, especially for something like tax rate increases. But it would be interesting if Boehner said, and I'm not saying this would be good policy, but I think it would be interesting if Boehner said, I am the Speaker of the House, and we are going to cut a deal that we think, that I believe is the best deal, and I'm going to consult with Eric Cantor and Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy, and we are going to come up with what we believe is the best deal to keep this government functioning, and then you will either vote for it, or you will vote against it, with all the consequences that comes with. It would be interesting to see. I suspect he would crash and burn. But it's like a movie almost,
Well, I mean, you have something that's forcing a lot of decisions to get made. That's why I don't get Bob Woodward's whininess about this. You've created a structure where people are having to make decisions and make tough calls, which is, one, I think, good governance, and two, interesting to watch. But the flip side of all this is, I do think there are simmering factions on the left that have not bubbled up to the surface in the same way that the Republican ones had.
Don't you think that's because of the media, Bill? I suspect that that's because of the media, that it's part of selection bias in the media, that they cover these internecine squabbles on the right, and they don't cover it on the left. I don't think it's because they don't exist on the left or that they're not interesting on the left. I think it's because they like watching Republicans fight and portraying the Republican Party as being, in disarray.
Oh, I think there's been lots of coverage about disarray on the left over the course of the Obama years. Maybe I'm a little more sensitive to it because I'm more in the middle of it than you are. I've certainly seen a lot of those stories. What's different now is a lot of the players on the left, which sometimes get quoted being antagonistic to the president, aren't saying antagonistic things. Adam Green at Progressive Change Campaign Committee was probably the most vociferous beltway anti-Obama critic from the left, has been very praiseworthy, which is very, very unusual for him. And what Obama has been able to do so far, I don't know if it's going to continue throughout the end game here. He has made the tax rate thing absolutely sacrosanct. Got in the outside liberal players to echo that message, and everyone's being very, there are people who are saying things about Social Security, Medicare, protect this, protect that. but it's not getting. So they're saying it. They're not saying it in a anti-Obama way. They're not being antagonistic towards Obama when they say it. They're not saying, Obama, you suck for putting this on the table. How dare you do that?
Let me say, Bill, I think you're right, and I think that, and I wrote something at the Daily Caller about this. Obama is a great, you have to say now, president. Not that I agree with him, but he is an accomplished, he's a great politician, maybe the best way for me to put it.
He has legacy accomplishments already.
Yeah. I mean, you like him or not, he has points on the board. And, I don't like Tom Brady, but he's a great quarterback, And so I wrote this piece, making this football analogy. In football, the quarterback is the most important person. And we saw with the Indianapolis Colts, when they lost Peyton Manning, they sucked. Now they've got Andrew Luck, and all of a sudden they're good again. The Washington Redskins got Donovan McNabb. He was sort of like Mitt Romney. He's the guy, he's not your future. He's not the guy you really want, but you hope he can get a few wins under his belt to get you to the future, to RG3, who I think might be Marco Rubio or someone, Bobby Jindal or Paul Ryan or somebody like that. So I think that, look, the other team, the Democrats, have a star quarterback, Barack Obama. And the Republicans, ostensibly my team, although I consider myself more of a conservative, but the Republicans don't have a quarterback. And so they're like the Colts last year or the Redskins last year. They're getting Obama's running up the score on them right now. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to beat them and embarrass them on national television. But here's the thing that I read at the Daily Caller today, Bill. Not to plug my stuff, but go read it. Is that right now it looks so gloomy, but it's entirely possible that in 4 years Republicans have the presidency, the Senate, and the House. I mean, things change quick. Last year the Colts stunk, and this year they're pretty darn good. And the Redskins next year could, for all we know, could win the Super Bowl. I mean, it would not astonish me. So fortunes change, and I think right now your quarterback, Obama is heading to Canton. He's heading to the Hall of Fame, and he's running up the score. And the Republicans, they don't have that leader right now. But I think that there's an RG3 on the bench. So,
what's potentially notable here is usually second terms are terrible. You run out of steam. You don't command the same influence. You overreach. You get into a scandal. All sorts of pitfalls have stymied past second termers. But Obama potentially is in a situation where he's absorbed those lessons. He even said publicly in his press conference that he knows the lessons of overreach. He's not coming out of the box with a proposal that wasn't stressed in the campaign. FDR came out of his second term pushing court packing, which wasn't talked about in his reelection campaign. Bush came out with Social Security privatization, which he talked about obliquely, but didn't really drive home what that was going to mean. And found out that the details, sparked a backlash. So Obama's staying pretty narrow on something that was very directly litigated, and in doing so is getting public opinion support in polling on the subject, and keeping his broader team in line, which, all the accomplishments I agree with you that he had in the first term were often fighting uphill against elements of his own team. He had to get over the fact that the left really wanted public option in healthcare. He had to get over the fact that folks wanted to cap the size of banks for Wall Street reform. He wasn't getting everyone singing from the same song sheet in a lot of these legislative battles. So this, for the first time, he's getting that from the outside players. Even though there is wiggle room on some highly politically sensitive matters like Medicare and less so in Social Security, because Obama's been pretty clear saying he wants to deal with that separately. And I don't know how well that coalition holds when it gets to the end game. It might not matter. I mean, it might be more important for Obama to hold it now. And if it breaks apart at the very end, so what? He'll still have votes from Democrats in Congress, most likely. But certainly giving him a continued perception of a guy who is the quarterback, whereas I think for a lot of the first term, there's a perception of a guy alone, fighting enemies from all sides and gutting things out. And so if he wins this way, does that give him a renewed shot of political capital that carries over for the second term and leads to more accomplishments and not sputters out in the first year of a second term, which often happens with other presidents?
Right, and we're not even into the second term yet, and so I think it's premature Obama could sort of stumble over the same stuff everyone does. Hubris, senior staff changes, lame duck status, other people jockeying for position. But I will say this, Bill. I think that Barack Obama's personality is a bit cautious, and he's an introvert, and I think it makes him less likely to make these mistakes that we've seen repeated in the vast majority of second terms, which have been failures. I think that he is more cautious and introspective. So we'll see what happens. History does not bode well for him, but he continues to defy historic trends. So, maybe he'll dodge that again.
Well, one last topic I want to get to before we go, because I know you're tracking his moves very closely. Marco Rubio,
literally tracking him. I'm behind him. Right now. I have him on my GPS. I know his whereabouts at all times.
He is certainly keeping a high profile in the very, very, very early 2016 race. He did the Kemp dinner last night, the Politico breakfast this morning. Is he saying anything notable and interesting? Is he offering the Republican Party a new path, a new rhetorical phrase, a new policy position, or is he just going to be a nice looking face on the same general agenda?
I think that Rubio is attempting to do something that is desperately needed, which is take conservative values and principles and make them relevant and apply them in a 21st century. Which goes to what I've been talking about, modernize, not moderate. And I think that he has continued to do that, to present conservatism in a positive, optimistic Reagan brand, as opposed to the negative, nativistic, austere brand. And so I think he continued that. He spoke last night at the Jack Kemp Foundation. He received their award. Paul Ryan also spoke. His speech last night was I think Tuesday night. I think today's Wednesday. Today's Wednesday, right?
Yes.
His speech Tuesday night was very broad policy, and I could see that I think he was trying some stuff out. It was a little too broad and a little too in the weeds for policy. In my opinion, he closed very strong, and I think Rubio does very well with the soaring rhetoric and talking about the American dream and his father, Mario, being a bartender. And he said, if he hadn't come to America, Rubio would have ended up probably being a very opinionated bartender like his father. And because of America, you could come here with like a fourth grade education like Mario Rubio had and be a bartender and have your son grow up to be a U.S. senator. That's really part of the American dream. This morning, Rubio spoke at the Politico breakfast, which was much more interesting in my opinion. Mike Allen basically interviewed him, and it was a lot of questions. Rubio, remember a couple weeks ago I talked about how Rubio mishandled a little bit the question about the age of the Earth, and how I wrote about it the week about how there's nothing inconsistent about being a Christian and believing that God, created the Earth and put things in motion, and you could believe in an old Earth and be a Christian. And Rubio really cleaned that up today and very eloquently made that point, which I had been advocating. I think he did great. He was hitting a home run. There will be one thing that I suspect will be made an issue of. Mike Allen asked him, is homosexuality a sin? And that's an interesting question. And Rubio essentially said that faith teaches that it is a sin, but a lot of things are sins. Envying somebody is a sin, and that his faith, that his faith tradition teaches him that, but that he doesn't judge people. So I suspect that there will be attempts to make something out of that. I don't know if he will have to be clarified or be more specific. But overall, I think he did very well, and I do suspect that Marco Rubio is the front runner right now for the Republican nomination for president, and I really think that he has a chance to essentially be the fulfillment of what I've been urging the Republican Party and conservatism to do, and that is to take conservative ideas and values. I actually wrote a speech at the Week. You can read it. It's a speech that Marco Rubio should give. And one of the things I talk about, it's as if I wrote the speech for Rubio or Jindal or Ryan to give. And one of the things I talk about is Uber. Bill, I don't know. Do you use Uber? Are you familiar with it?
I'm not.
So Uber is really awesome. You can download the app on your smartphone, and you just click it, and there's a GPS. It knows where you are. It sends within 5 or 10 minutes. It sends a car to pick you up, like a town car or something, and it will take you. For me, I use it from Virginia to D.C., and it costs about $30. You don't have to tip because tip's built in. You don't need to carry cash. It will automatically bill your credit card and email you a receipt. And it's a great service, but in a lot of cities, and they just got clearance in D.C., but in a lot of cities, they're facing major challenges from the cab companies who don't like Uber. They don't like this, and the cities are worried that the cab companies are lobbying to shut this down. And it's a great thing. In my speech, this speech that I wrote ostensibly for a conservative to deliver, it talks about how if you're a young person, you want to start a business, you want to be entrepreneurial, using technology, Uber is a great company, and here you have cities trying to shut them down with regulations, just egregious regulations that they can't compete with. And so, I'm much more eloquent in the speech than I am being right now, but that's an example of how you can use...
That's why we have teleprompters, Matt.
What's that?
That's why we have teleprompters.
I need a teleprompter. I do need a teleprompter. But I guess the point is that when Republicans and conservatives talk about free markets, a lot of times it just doesn't mean anything. But young people young urban people especially, I think, love Uber. And explaining how, big government regulations want to shut it down, I think is a way that we can take conservative positions and make them relevant in the 21st century to younger, more urban audiences.
It's really interesting to me that Rubio is doing this. Certainly, I think he is doing the right thing for his prospects by putting himself out there early and putting himself on the hot seat and exposing himself to questioning. And if he is a strong candidate, he will learn from the process and get better as he goes along.
Right, and I think the evolution, I call it the age of the Earth question, is a prime example. He got asked that question in GQ. It created a minor snafu, a minor kerfluffle, maybe a major controversy even for a couple of days. But now he has a much better answer. And he was asked that question at Politico breakfast, and he had a very cogent, coherent answer. And I don't think he would have gotten there had he not gone through that process.
I agree. And look, you can go look at the 2008 campaign and see some of Obama's early appearances, and some of them were not so sharp.
Yeah. Some of the debates seemed like he had 19 debates.
Right, and his performance in the later debates were a lot better than some of those early debates.
Absolutely.
And some people sort of dismissed him early, saying this guy is all hype. There's no substance there. He's not nearly as exciting as people make him out to be. But he was always learning, always getting better and better. I think Paul Ryan suffered from doing a lot of appearances only in very conservative audiences and being told how awesome you are at communicating to the broader country.
Yeah.
And not having to do it, and then just getting thrown into standing with Palin or Dan Quayle, and with folks who just get thrown into the mix without really being prepped, can make mistakes. And I think Rubio is doing the right thing. So he'll see where he's strong, where he's weak, and he have the opportunity to make adjustments as he goes along. And he seems to have some capacity to do that.
Yeah, I think you're right. His team is incredibly sharp. They're very good at what they do. He is a very smart guy. I am optimistic about his future. I don't think that I'm going out on a limb in making that statement.
We'll have to save our discussion of Hillary romping the most recent 2016 poll. There are times I need to jump, but it's always good to talk to you, Matt.
Likewise, my friend.
Always pleasant in the DMZ, no matter what the weather.
It's a balmy, moist in the DMZ. It's like going to Miami.
So we need to figure out if we can do next week. I don't know if you can do Friday or not. That's all I can do, but we can talk about that offline.
Let me know. All right, man. Till next time.
Till next time. Take care.
Thanks.